Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bhartiya, and welcome to another episode of TFiR Let's Talk. And today we have with us once again David Ginsburg, VP of Product and Solutions Marketing at Aryaka. David, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much for your hospitality today.
Yeah, we talked to each other as you reminded, like what decades or hundreds of years ago before COVID. But this is the first time we are talking to each other when you are with Aryaka. So please tell us a bit about the company itself.
Sure. Aryaka is based in the Bay Area, south of San Francisco. We have probably our largest facility in Bangalore, where we have most of our engineering and our customer success. And fundamentally, we offer an outsourced WAN service that integrates connectivity and security. And what's interesting is we're about 13 years old, got our start in the managed WAN optimization, WAN acceleration space, always as a managed service. About 6, 7 years ago, as the term SD-WAN started coming into vogue, we really the shoe fit as it was called, and so we latched onto that. And then more recently, as the industry has been pivoting to really the integration of networking and network security through SASE, we've been now characterizing ourselves in the SASE space. But really, one of the true differentiation is that we not only build our technology, but we offer it as part of our global managed services. So there's no handoff. We don't really offer our technology to third parties like other MSPs or telcos. And except in a couple rare instances, we don't integrate technology from other vendors. And the result is really a top tier customer experience, handoff experience, really an all-in-one global and regional services offer.
As you talked about, increased focus on security as well. So talk a bit about, how would you define, zero trust WAN? And once again, you also talked about, you don't, offer it to a lot of other players, or integrate their services. So let's talk about, the overall experience that folks get through, your unified SASE architecture. So let's start with how would you define zero trust WAN, and then let's talk about your offering architecture.
Sure, thank you. And as we all know, zero trust, it can be confusing. We sometimes joke that there's almost as many interpretations of zero trust as there are vendors in the space. And so we try to lock that down a little bit more by bringing it together with the WAN. And the WAN implies, not only security, but connectivity. You need both. You need this pervasive architecture that, allows the enterprise to consume these capabilities wherever they are and whenever they are. And, one of the things we sometimes run into are other vendors, as an example, that talk to our prospects and they say, well, you maybe don't need the connectivity, you just need the security. But without the connectivity, you don't really have that end-to-end observability and control over application performance. And so our definition of zero trust WAN really integrates the connectivity, the network security, and elements of the network security include things like managed firewalls as a service or SWIG or other types of functionality that are part and parcel to the network security side of the unified SASE architecture and the zero trust WAN architecture.
Perfect. As you're also talking earlier, when explaining about the evolution of, WAN, especially at, the company, can you talk about, what is driving that evolution? Is it because of some business and user trends that you're seeing? Of course, what you folks do is cater to the problem that people are facing. That's how a lot of solutions comes into the place. That's where a lot of evolution happens. So talk about what's driving this evolution at the company itself.
Sure. If you look at enterprises, they're moving to multi-cloud architectures. Some people call it really the cloud-first enterprise. They now have vastly different workforces. It's a truly distributed hybrid workforce. The two of these together result in connectivity challenges and result in a much more complex security architecture. So they want simplification. They want something that's more delivered from the cloud, where with this distributed employee base, an on-prem solution isn't necessarily going to cut it anymore. They want something that is not going to result in errors. It's easier to consume. And one way we look at this is like, why do you want to offer it as a managed service? Why do you want to bring together this various functionality? Think of a cake and think of all the ingredients you buy in a store. And I don't know if you ever watched it, but there's in the US and the UK, there's this, think of it as baking disaster programs where these people are given the list of ingredients and they end up with something you wouldn't feed to your dog. And so, but what they're looking for is, that corner bakery where the cake, looks incredible. And so that's, instead of giving people the raw ingredients and letting them sink or swim on their own, we give them that fully baked cake, which they can consume.
So talk a bit about the value proposition that you folks bring to the market, and if you can also kind of compare with some competitors who are also similar solutions. So the picture that I'm looking at is looking at these challenges that people already have with the skill gap, complexity, and then also once again, folks have been filled for a while. So does it make sense? The question, is it clear?
Oh, it is. And so, I'll start out with, fundamental differentiation. And this goes back to the essence of what we and some of the analysts are calling unified SASE. And that implies a tightly coupled managed offer that brings together the connectivity and the network security. In order to do that, you have to have a foundation that supports, to use some terminology, single pass architecture, software-defined workflows that create a unified experience spanning the connectivity and the network security instead of a siloed experience that results in, a greater chance of error, less employee satisfaction, less end-to-end application performance. And so that some people call disaggregated. Really, it's a siloed or a separated SASE architecture where the enterprise, even though they're consuming it from a single vendor, what looks like connectivity may be delivered totally different from the delivery of the security functionality. The other thing that we could look at the differentiation is there's only really a handful of vendors that have been categorized as unified SASE. And one of the things you want to look at for this end-to-end application performance is the flexibility across the middle mile. What we can bring to the table is really a multi-layer architecture, one, layer 2 on fiber, second, layer 3 over point-to-point IP circuits. So it gives the enterprise really the flexibility on how to consume the service, whether they're regional, whether they're local, or whether they're global, and realizing that consuming the service also implies being able to hand off to the cloud providers. And so this is the type of flexibility that enterprises are looking for. The last point is that, going back to the original point I made, is that we build our own technology. We offer it as a managed service. Lots of times you'll see the technology vendors building the technology, but then having to hand it off. And this results in a little bit more of a disjointed experience. For example, the enterprise needs some new functionality. The provider has to work with the enterprise to put it on the engineering roadmap. We don't have those disconnects. We don't have that handoff that sometimes results in a subpar enterprise, employee experience or an application performance experience.
Excellent. Now let's just stick to this point, that fully kind of convergent or integrated with the network and security that you folks are offering. You talked about the benefits. You also talk about what enterprises escape all the problems that might come with disjointed solutions. Talk a bit about if are there some specific, not especially playbook, but best practices so that the enterprise customers can reap benefits of the whole convergence that you are bringing with network and security.
Sure. And really, the best way to look at it is we draw an analogy to the cloud consumption model. A decade and a half ago, enterprises were very reluctant to move their key workloads, really the keys of the kingdom, to like an AWS or an Azure or now Google. That's happening now. Enterprises are a lot more comfortable with that now. And so that same flexibility, scalability, total cost of ownership, ability to address the skills shortage and the budgeting of training, that comes with the cloud consumption model. We see the same thing with the network and network security consumption model. And once again, going back to first principles, the original definition of SASE is network as a service and network security as a service. So this approach, this managed service approach, fits very well with the trajectory that the enterprises have been going in really over the last decade now.
We are almost at the end of 2022. I don't know how long it will stretch with the war going on between Ukraine and Russia, so it might become another decade. We barely got out of COVID, but we are at the end of the year. So talk a bit about, first of all, based on all the not only trends, but you're seeing how enterprises are like, still struggling with, maintaining a balance between security while moving fast and, also trying to remain competitive. So in 2023, once again, it's really hard to talk about year these days because you don't know how much things will change within like 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
But what are some of the biggest challenges that you are seeing looking at these trends, the movement within the market, that, hey, this is where enterprises not only might get stuck, this is where they should pay attention to, and this is what should be their priority and focus?
Sure. So really a couple things come to mind. One, the CIO is increasingly being called on to transform, to be the transformational CIO, as we sometimes say. And this is, unrelentless pressure. It's obviously happened a lot and accelerated a lot over the past 3 years, as we know, but it's not going to end. It's only going to continue. Really, the second thing is, the evolution of the threat perimeter, based, for example, what I said on multi-cloud architectures based on the hybrid workforce. And then, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the skills shortage. Somewhere I read that, over the coming, half decade or decade, there's going to be a shortage of over 3.5 million skilled security personnel. And that's a scary number. And so those three things are really coupled with the constant demand to do more with less. We have the budgeting issues as we go into very uncertain economic times. As we know, who knows, how much budget's going to be available for some of these transformational activities. And so what can be brought to the table is three things. One, to address the transformational aspects, going back to what I said about the zero trust WAN that really offers the performance and the pervasive security that addresses the evolved security perimeter. Second, on the transformational side, addressing the enterprise needs where they are. They can't just throw everything out. It can't be a rip and replace. It's got to be evolutionary, not revolutionary, while at the same time not forcing them into, say, a technology or services cul-de-sac that won't meet their business objectives for the future. And then third, as far as the skills shortage, what they want is not only a managed service, but something's co-managed. And what we mean by that is where enterprise IT wants some ability to set their parameters, set their controls. We give them that. In other cases, they're working with a partner or a system integrator that provides some of that manageability. So they want a very flexible environment, managed services environment that is tailored to their skill sets, their capabilities, the size of their IT department.
David, thank you so much for taking time out today, and of course talked about Aryaka. And it's really good to see you again after a long time. I hope that we will not have such a long gap, and we'll talk more frequently because this topic is also becoming very important in this space. But I really appreciate your insights and your advice to the companies. And as I said, I would love to have you back on the show. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll keep in touch. Bye.